I probably did. I probably did. But the reason why I wanted to talk to people like you and other people in the book is because even though your story for what you do, both as a profession and your hobby, passionate hobby, drawing and doing all kinds of artwork for a lot of different people and various different scenarios, a lot of T-shirts. Uh, you still have a humongous background in, well, the world that I came out of. And I just thought it'd be interesting to ask you questions about how your year's gone, because this year's been pretty weird for the full-time musicians that we know.
Yeah.
And we're almost lucky to not really, which I never thought I would say, but, because of the pandemic and everything. How has life been for you this year since all this stuff has started? The pandemic, and now that we're like 6 or 7 months into it.
Yeah, like you, it's not been like really radically different, in that, apart from the fact that like I can't go out to shows and I can't be, meeting bands and doing, work for people that are out on the road. It's been about the same in that I've got a lot of time, and during this, it's been mainly the summer. And so as a teacher, I'm off during the summer anyway. So my summer didn't look much different apart from the fact that, I wasn't going out. I didn't have an option or anything, but it did mean that I could get a lot more artwork done. And I know like yourself too, during the summertime, like both of us were really super busy with things. And I actually wound up doing a lot more paintings, and I haven't had as much time to do that. A lot of them were commission ones. So it wasn't like, I was just painting and doing things just for my amusement. But a lot of it was work that people were hiring me to do. So while I wasn't doing a lot of band related stuff, like as far as like shirts for touring stuff, I was doing a lot of music related things in like, Sharpie drawings, and then, doing paintings of, people and stuff like that. So it was a lot of music related things, but not related to, hey, we're going out on tour and we need like 3 new t-shirts, which is normally what I do. Like the summer is normally about, actually, spring is kind of when that all, exactly. Spring is when that starts getting like geared up. I mean, I start working on stuff just like you do before bands go out. And then there's a wealth of stuff. And then I see bands throughout the summer, get exposed to people that I didn't, see in a while, or, see new bands that I want to work with. And so that part was kind of strange, not having the diversions of going out in the evenings. But during the days, it was just a lot of doing artwork. And that part was really, it's been really nice actually. But now that school's started, the artwork stuff has tailed off quite a bit because, we're all doing distance learning in California, which means all of my curriculum is now online, and all of what I would normally teach, I'm now having to figure out, well, how do I do that online? And that's been tricky. So I now that school's started, I haven't had nearly enough time for doing my artwork. So I'm trying to really figure that stuff out right now.
Right. And for those, can you explain to the viewers of the thousands of viewers, I'll be no doubt flocking.
I think you first said viewer.
Do another episode of the Self Empunishment YouTube page. Can you tell people that don't know who you are what your actual profession is?
Yeah, so I'm a high school drama teacher, and I've been teaching now. This is my 24th year of teaching. I think it's my 18th year of teaching drama, which is just kind of like I kind of wound up doing it by accident. And this year I now also have an art class. So I was a classically trained. I was trained, and I went in.
Violinist.
Exactly. I'm really great. I went into, be an art teacher, and I taught art at middle school for 5 years. And then we moved to California. And when we came out here, I was teaching art full-time for a year, and then I picked up doing drama, and then kind of wound up by default being a drama teacher. And so that's what I do. That's what pays all my bills and everything. And then the artwork is just stuff that I can do, supplementally. And the truth is that as a public school teacher, you have to do something supplementally, because it'd be great to say, I'm paid so well that takes care of everything, but truthfully it doesn't. So all of the artwork is, I mean, it's nice to be able to do that also to offset, the fact that I need to be able to make more to actually, live however I want to live.
Yeah, of course. So, all right. So not much has really changed for you other than having to cram all this stuff together, because you said you
just froze up on me, Brian.
had like a couple like time, and you didn't even really know until like when it was super close to when it was announced that you were going to do when you were doing this. I believe, right?
Yeah, we weren't really positive what was going to be going on. There was kind of some
That
back
makes
and
sense.
Yeah, there was some back and forth about, are we going to be in person or are we going to be going on a block schedule? Are we going to do a modified thing? Are we actually going to start a week later? And as it turns out, we stuck with the regular schedule that we were going to be doing. So in other words, I'm up every morning and my first class starts at 7:20, just like it would start if we were in school. And I have 55-minute classes with 5-minute passing period. Right. So like that stuff, but I wasn't for sure what was going to be happening. And so a week before school opened, they said, yep, for sure, we're going to be doing the distance learning. And now you need to start figuring out how you're going to make your curriculum work in an online manner. And, oh, by the way, you also have an art class that I haven't taught in like a decade. So it was all of the drama stuff now has to be online. And here's a new class that, you haven't taught in a really long time. So good luck.
No biggie.
Yeah.
You can do it.
So, but I mean, but at the very least, I have that job and I do have gainful employment, and, there was never any worry for me that I wouldn't. So, it's complaining, but it's only complaining in the sense that things are uncomfortable because they're new. And I probably, a lot like you, don't really care for change all that much. I mean, I wish that I could say I always embrace that and like I'm really excited about stuff being different, but I'm really not. I get, set in my ways, and this has really shaken up everybody in the teaching world. And I kind of feel like that's a good thing, because I wouldn't do it unless I was forced, and now I'm forced to. So hopefully if the kids get something valuable out of it, then it was worth it.
Yeah, cool. Well, it sounds like you're doing pretty good.
Right.
Not much has really changed. So, with that in mind, we're going to get into the real reason we're going to talk. And that's because of our backgrounds and being punk rock fans and being artistic and drawing stuff, and how that led to whatever it is we do now, whatever they call it in the year 2020. And last time I talked to you in the botched interview, we talked a lot about people that we were influenced by artistically, that we maybe were exposed to after we got into what they call punk rock or whatever. And we left out, and I thought that we left out a few people for sure. And we'll get to all the people that we talked about, but a couple of people that we didn't talk about, and I only thought about this later, like about maybe 3 minutes ago while we were talking, actually, was since I was wearing this nice big boy shirt that Chris drew.
That's a beautiful one, isn't it?
No, it's really nice. I like it. I thought about it and I was like, yeah. But the reason I bring up your shirt, not just I'm trying to promote Shary, is that a few of the people that I know we both were really influenced by their music and their attitude and how they conducted themselves were the big boys from Austin, Texas. And in particular, Randy Biscuit Turner, the late Randy Turner, who did incredible collage art, and Tim Kerr, the guitar player, Tim Kerr, who has sort of I don't want to say reinvented himself as a painter, but he's been a painter and he always was artistic, and both of those guys had artwork on their records and stuff like that. And that was also tying all this together. That was initially how we met when you called me up out of the blue in the 90s, because you were given permission, or I don't know how you were in charge of it, but you were in charge of getting the Big Boys Rec Collection reissue put out, and you contacted people that I guess you wanted to say hi and see if they would draw something for this project, and I think I was one of those people.
You were,
so thanks for that, of course.
Yeah.
But what is it about the Big Boys and their whole thing that was really attractive to you, or that spoke to you? You go first, and I'll follow.
Yeah, everything. I mean, everything. So when I first heard the Big Boys, it was from the Big Boys skate rock compilation, and
okay.
I don't remember if it was the first one or if it was the third one. I honestly don't recall exactly which one it was. But
weren't they on all of them?
They were on I think the first 3, I want to say.
Okay.
You know, and I could be wrong about that, but I had heard them from that, and of course, like they were always synonymous with like Thrasher, and they were, you know, the very first, you know, punk band that had a skateboard that was done. Zorlak did their board, and of course Zorlak had great stuff that Pushead did the artwork for. So for me, as a young kid who was a skater, initially there was, okay, there's that connection, and then hearing them in my family. We grew up with like disco and funk music and like Motown soul. That's like what we listened to. And you know, my parents were first married. They lived in London, and they used to go out and see these bands that did, you know, Motown covers. So that was always playing at our house. I mean, like that was the kind of stuff that was part of my background. So as I got into punk rock, when I saw a band melding funk with skateboarding and punk, and then artistically were representing themselves in a really wild manner, and having a really great sense of humor, but at the same time also a lot of very political and conscientious lyrics, and I know that a lot of that was, you know, from all of them. I mean, mainly, you know, Randy and Tim, but Chris also, you know, was not only writing stuff, but he was also doing artwork too. And that was something that just had a huge impact on me. And, you know, like seeing the, you know, now go start your own band, and the whole idea that pushing everybody to, you know, that DIY spirit, but they were saying it in every interview and in shows that they played. To me, that really spoke to me, because, and Tim's exactly like that to this day, where, you know, he, as a matter of fact, like they played, I think they were opening for Pearl Jam. I think Monkey Wrench was opening for Pearl Jam, and they played like the Reading Fest or Wembley. It was one of those huge things. And Tim got down off the stage and handed his guitar out to somebody in the crowd so they could start playing. And that whole idea of, there really shouldn't be barriers in between the band and you know, the fans, really was appealing to me, because it was like, yes, we can do this, and here's these people that are saying you're being empowered to do it. So there was nothing about them that did not appeal to me. I mean, it was the colors, it was the attitude, it was the intelligence and the humor and the I mean, everything.
And the diversity of the music. I mean, it was it was really varied. And my story, I don't think I heard the skate rock stuff. I think I read about them in Flipside when they first went to the West Coast. Maybe
that's the one where Randy's in the tutu, right?
Tutu, yeah. That was just when I was getting aware of all that stuff, and they were in that Glennie Friedman My Rules book that came out, that he put out. So there, you know, that was sort of my representation. Okay, here's this world. This is all that stuff. And they're from Texas, and they were the band from Texas. I mean, I know that they wouldn't say so, but back then it was such a small thing. And here's this weird My Rules book or whatever. And then I think when I heard them, it must have been. I didn't hear all the earlier ones. I think the first record I bought was Lullabies.
Yeah, that was my first too.
And that just blew me away. And the thing I took from them was that they were very positive. Do it yourself, definitely. Very, very life affirming. Like them in the minute. That to me, the two bands that, when I look back about that sort of all-encompassing human sort of thing, were the Big Boys and the Minutemen. And occasionally, at times, both bands kind of sounded sort of like each other. I mean, they had the same producer and a few spot, few records, whatever.
You know,
but they were just very life affirming, and and the music was good and it was varied. Like the funky stuff. That was just as good and valid as the post punk stuff they did, or eventually the hardcore stuff, and all the early stuff. Like, I don't think there's been one recording they did that was crap. Like, everything they've recorded was good. Everything. And I can't say that about almost any other band that I put up there. Everything that the Big Boys did was good. From The Seed, that song The Seed, to the Frat Cars 7-inch, to the last record, to everything. And, I never saw them or whatever, but I think I met a couple of them. And they were just they were real positive. Like, I wasn't really attracted to, like, Sid Vicious, spiky mohawk, drink a 40-ouncer, and hang out on the train tracks punk rock. I was just attracted to the creativeness of these weirdos and the fact that the music was good. It was just about that. And they were just like, go start your own band, go be creative, go do stuff. More like hands-on, we're just going to do this for ourselves and do it ourselves. And, I even heard an interview that Tim did today where he said, I'd rather just call what we did, do it yourself, than punk rock, because punk rock just, there's a lot of stuff about punk rock I fucking hated, and to this day,
Of course.
I'll listen to whatever I want. I don't have to invent all these rules about, punk rock had a lot of rules, and the Big Boys didn't have any rules, and they were very life-affirming and positive.
They had a song called Rules about not wanting to have rules, So, that's exactly it.
Yeah. So to this day, and I'm sure it must, on one level, be kind of annoying for the surviving members to, we've done stuff since 1984, 85. We've done stuff since 1990, but at the same time, it's like, that still must be a good feeling to be so renowned for just, not even just music, just the whole thing. It's like a whole universe. Because Minutemen created their own universe. Black Flag created their own universe. Minor Threat, Saccharine Trust, Flipper. All these bands created their own universes out of this thing they called punk rock. And they were, giving these guys props.
Oh, hey. So, yeah. Totally kind of like, well, it's not off topic, but you mentioned it. So I did you hear this before? Like, I just heard this today. I saw a thing, and I don't know if it's Ted Falcone's birthday today, guitarist of Flipper.
Okay.
But there was a quote I saw today from Ted Falcone.
I don't know if it's his birthday or not.
But anyway, there's a quote of him saying, "Hey, you know that movie Apocalypse Now? You know how they're talking about, the guy surfing in Da Nang? That was me." And he said, "I was the only guy in Da Nang who I knew of who brought a surfboard with me and was surfing in Da Nang." He said that bit in Apocalypse Now about surfing in Da Nang is about me, Ted Falcone.
Weird.
Isn't that crazy? And I knew that he was in Vietnam. I knew that.
I knew that too.
But that's wild.
That's crazy.
Well, and I know, you can appreciate that because, you and I just nerd out over stuff like that, too. But that was the first time I'd ever heard that, and I just went, oh, my gosh. Now I want to see, and, of course, I want to see Flipper anytime, but, now I want to see them more. Because when they played I guess it was the last Punk Rock Bowling, without question, that was one of the best bands that was on the entire, 300-band bill. I mean, they were so mind-alteringly great. And it was the first night. I got there and saw Flipper, and afterwards, I mean, I did not feel like the same person at all.
I love Flipper. Flipper.
How could you? Well, I shouldn't say how could you not, because a lot of people hate them, and I get it. But wow.
Well, they also had. It's a great formula. It's okay, well, initially it was a great formula. Let's have two guys rotate bass and vocal duties. We're going to write these songs where there's only two parts to them that go on for 5 to 8 minutes. And whoever wrote the lyrics sings them. And that guy, Will Shatter, wrote some really impressively great lyrics on, I Saw You Shine. That's some heavy, deep stuff, you know.
Oh yeah.
Bruce's were a little lighter and more sarcastic, I guess, but you know, they were like no rules, you know. That's what punk rock always said. Well, you want no rules. Okay, well, here you go. And as it turns out, a lot of people like those rules. But anyway, so since we talked about the big boys, guys, and we talked about some art, let's go through a few other names because I want to make sure we get to some of the people we talked about. When I was a kid, and I know you agree with me, one of my big heroes initially was Pushead. And even though I've told that famous story about, well, I'll just retell it really very briefly. It's not all how I feel now or anything like that, but and you touched on this last week, but yeah, he was the dude back then, you know, and he was an incredibly accomplished illustrator. And, you know, I could barely draw at that point. I mean, I was always artistic, but, you know, and,
But
you
not in
know, I
that
met
league.
him. Huh?
Yeah, definitely not in that league. I mean, he had finishing skills that I think both of us really lacked at the time.
Oh, totally. Oh, yeah, yeah, without a doubt, you know. You know, I can't say that it made me want to sit down and draw Mohawk skulls or anything like that, but
Yeah, but he's
but
already doing it, so fine.
yeah, somebody else is doing a great job. But he was really cool the first time we met, which is actually when I saw Septic Death play at the Cafe de Grand with Condemned to Death from San Francisco. And he was really nice, very cool and welcoming. And then there was this weird sort of thing where like maybe 6 months later or half a year later, well, it's the same thing. I started to get, you know, I wrote to him because I was a fan and he was encouraging, and that was, you had to write to people back then, and that's how you stayed in touch. And then I realized, well, I can draw stuff for people and bands and do fanzines, contribute to people's things. And I started to do that, and I started to get a little name. And I was even in a band, and we went up and stayed at the Maximum Rock and Roll House, and he was there, and he just kind of, I don't know, refused to talk to me. And then Tim Yohannan said something like, oh, he's kind of mad at you because he thinks you don't spend enough time on your art. And I haven't seen him since, you know. That was a long time ago, you know. And I always remember that because I was just like, how weird is it that somebody could get weird about a fan who's nowhere even close
But you know, if you think about it,
to
it's
being
kind
in the
of
same
a
league as this
compliment.
person that, you know, isn't that weird?
Yeah, but
Huh?
you know, I was thinking about that before, and it's kind of like this weird backhand compliment in that if he's irritated by that, clearly there was something about what you were doing that he felt needed encouragement. And if you weren't doing what he thought you maybe should be doing to get better at things, that was discouraging for him. You know,
Yeah,
so
it's kind of weird.
you know, I mean, if you look at it like that, I can see him being like, "Oh man, this guy has got some, you know, some good chops and you know whatever."
Man,
Who knows?
the chops came way later. But I know that you've been friendly. But I'm telling that story not to be a dick or anything. I'm just telling that story because that's what happened, and I was a big fan. He was a huge inspiration, just because he was like a cool guy doing all this artwork and stuff. And you know, everybody knew who Pushead was, and I know that you've met him a few times, and you had a much different experience.
Well,
experience.
yeah, I mean, the first time that I had any interaction with him was through Tesco V. I had been doing
Yeah,
some artwork for Tesco, and you know he had still been in touch with Pushead, and I probably asked you know Pushead or asked Tesco about getting his number or whatever, and I wanted to call him because I was starting to get to the point where I was going to be getting business that was actually paying. Because like you and I, you know, we started off where we just did stuff and
yeah.
literally sent them the drawings and never expected to hear back or get any copies or anything. I mean, it was just like you draw it and you send it away. But I started getting SST was interested in having me do some stuff, and I wanted to make sure that I was, you know, doing it right, and I wasn't too naive. I mean, obviously, I was really very naive about things, but I didn't want to feel like really I missed out on something that maybe I should have been paying attention to. And not at all that I was suspicious of SST at all, not a bit. They were they were like at that particular time, you know, late 80s, they were without a doubt the most vital underground record label, you know,
Absolutely.
of them all. So I just wanted to feel like I could go in, and I didn't seem like a real rookie, like I didn't even know what I was talking about or anything. And
Yeah,
so
sure.
I had remembered that Pushead did this this article in Maximum Rock and Roll where he was talking about, you know, like doing your artwork and like how you go about, you know, getting it turned into a T-shirt or for record covers or things like that. So
Yeah, I remember that.
and you know, and I was like, well, but I've got all these other questions, and he's working exactly with the same type of people that I'm going to be working with. So maybe I could, you know, get some advice. And he was so patient with me. I mean, I was on the phone with him for, I want to say a couple of hours. I don't know if that's true. But I had called him, and he was extremely gracious with his advice and his time and encouraging, and he knew my work. He had seen the stuff that I had been doing for Tesco, and he was very encouraging about it. And I'm sure he offered me some, you know, advice about what I was doing also. And so I just left like, you know, on top of the world, just like going, oh my gosh, why on earth would he take the time? And that really impressed me. You know, because like at that time, that's like the late 80s, he's now, you know, the go-to artist for Metallica, but he's taking the time to talk to me about things and very encouraging. So years later, you know, we finally meet in person at Designer Con down in Pasadena. And I knew he was there, you know, doing some signings and things. And so I just kind of sheepishly went up and said, hey, Pushead, don't want to, you know, interrupt or anything, but, you know, just a big fan and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, you did this stuff for Descendents. And I was like, yeah. And like, you know, of course I was taken aback. Like, why would Pushead know who I am? So he said, oh yeah, you know, a friend of mine in Japan is a huge fan. You know, I'd love to be able to get something. And I said, okay, no problem. So I did a little drawing, a Milo drawing, came on back, slipped it off to him, and he said, I'll come on by later and you know, talk with you at your booth, because we had a booth there. And I figured, okay, I'm sure he says that to a lot of people because a lot of people want to talk to him. Sure enough, the end of the evening, he comes on out and comes up to the booth and you know, we start talking, and we talked for a good half hour about just, you know, artwork and this and that. And he said, well, you know, what do I owe you for the artwork? And I was like, your boss said, I mean, you don't owe me anything. And like, I mean, I was happy to do it for him because I can, you know, so for me, it was nothing. And one of the guys that was with him, he was like, I'll go back to the booth and get a bunch of, you know, like the stuff that I was selling to give to Chris. And I was like, okay. Well, and then I wound up the next year, he was at Designer Con again. And so I made sure to kind of sneak on up in line. I was like, hey, Buzz. And he was like, hey, if I get a chance, I want to hang out and talk. And, you know, just as nice as could be and very, very encouraging. And I know, you know, other people, you know, besides yourself have had dealings with him that were, you know, less than perfect. But, you know, for me, it's just incredible that, you know, he would, number one, take the time to encourage somebody at very, very early in my career. I'm using the air quote. It's like, what I mean, like his career.
My art career.
Yeah, but and for him to still, you know, want to be encouraging and just very friendly and approachable, you know, it's really, and I'm sure you feel this way on occasion, like I do. But I feel like I have something to talk to him about, and while I'm not in the same league, I'm in the same ballpark with him. I mean, we're hanging around the locker room together, and like that's pretty cool.
I know what you mean. It's why it's like the people that had our shared experiences. It's why we kind of can have a conversation like this because we actually went through that experience together,
Oh, yeah.
and which is a hard thing to convey to people. That, and it's not saying, well, if you weren't our age back then, part of this cool. It's not that, but it's just that when you actually were there during, you know, it's just part of our how we grew up, you know. So it's like it's why you know, like on one of those Melvin's tours, I ended up having dinner in Fort Collins with Carl, who I hadn't seen in like 20 years, Carl from the Descendents. And it was like no time had passed. It's like slipping on an old pair of shoes because of the shared background that we had, which is no different than seeing William Duvall, who's the singer for Alice in Chains, but he was still a punk rock guy that I used to write to his old band in 1985, and because of those experiences, it's kind of it's what you say. It's like you're in the same ballpark for sure, and that's that's it.
That's a cool feeling,
Oh, yeah, it is. And it's kind of rare, actually. I mean,
it is.
To actually talk to somebody that is sort of like, I don't want to say your tribe or whatever, but just maybe that same sort of experience, the ballpark or whatever, So,
Well, and, for me, that's part of why I love, and I know you've heard me go on and on about it, but I absolutely love and adore punk rock bowling. Like, it is without question, like, my favorite thing to do throughout the year. And part of that is because it's all of us. I mean, it's everybody that has these shared experience, and new people and people that have come out of the woodwork. And I mean, it's no exaggeration to say I can walk down the street in Las Vegas during that weekend and I can strike up a conversation with virtually anybody and feel like I have more in common with the average person, because they're there. I mean, they are the majority of the people who are on Fremont Street for that weekend. And I feel more like I fit in than I do anywhere in the world, which is very bizarre. And, like you can have somebody that's, a brand new band that you've never seen before doing something that's really exciting, and you talk to them, and I mean, even though they might be in their 20s, there's nothing that's really too weird about that, because like you said, we have these shared experiences, even though they've done it at different times. But then you get somebody like Ed Falcone who's there, and you go, oh my gosh, what do I even say to this guy? It's pretty great. I mean, and it's, it's in a lot of ways, it's like a convention where all these people have congregated in one spot. And, for me, it's like nothing could be better than that.
Yeah, cool. Well, let's move on to Shawn Kerri.
Yeah, my favorite.
We talked about her, and I think we talked about Raymond Pettibone.
We did.
And we talked about Pushead, and I brought up Mad Mark Rude, and those were all people from the same kind of universe, even though they maybe they weren't in each other's universe, but in the same galaxy, I guess. And and then we talked about Shawn Kerri and like how her whole thing with what happened to her was shrouded in mystery and stuff, but just how great her artwork was, and I think I said that out of everybody that I came in contact with, as far as discovering artists and their work through punk rock, that Shawn Kerri, the woman that created the Circle Jerks Skank guy, and worked, what was the magazine? She worked at Cartoons, I guess?
Yeah, she worked at Cartoons.
Okay. But she did all this artwork, and then to this day, like a bunch of her stuff is in, maybe you've seen it, it's that Flip Side issue that put out, that was just an all art issue. Okay. Yeah, well, her stuff in there is like sort of like the best stuff, kind of.
Oh, without doubt. Without a doubt.
And she was like the best. I've parodied her style a lot, because parody is kind of what I do a lot of the time. But she also just has these incredible skills that just remind me of everything I loved about Mad Magazine, because that's where I came from. So I already said whatever about Shawn. Why don't you take over and tell the world what Shawn Kerri meant to you?
Oh yeah, I mean, you are 100% on the money. I mean, she was for guys like you and me, the equivalent of, Jim Davis or Mort Drucker from Mad Magazine in the punk rock world.
Yes.
So that same ability,
totally.
And you knew when you looked at her stuff that she was using brush, and she was using India ink, and she was using pens with nibs and things that I didn't understand. And I mean, her line work is so exquisite, and her simplification of things, because like when she does a crowd shot and you've got people like far away, the ability to quickly decipher detail on things is remarkable, as it is with like the fine detail that she has on like just say, for example, on the Skanking Kid, just looking at the wristband, you've got, a spiky wristband with a plaid torn shirt underneath it. But the amount of detail that she's woven into those two items is remarkable. I mean,
Yeah.
she could render things and breathe life into, and she was one of those perfect people that you knew had a world in her head about how everything's supposed to look. And
Yeah.
she was just giving us glimpses of what that was in a way that I haven't seen any punk artist do before or since.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, she was probably the best, man. I mean, as far as coming out of that world, in term, maybe just the best to me. Like, because
but I agree. I mean, I agree with that, and the fact that she was doing all of this stuff for, like, the Germs and Fear and TSOL and all that stuff, while at the same time still working at Cartoons magazine. And, like, I could give a crap about cars. Like, I have never had any interest in that.
I have no interest in cars.
Don't care.
I couldn't give less than shit about.
Oh,
I mean,
me too.
I just never cared.
And she was a gearhead, and she fit into that world, and, like, that's what she did. But she also blessed the punk rock community with this incredible artwork. I mean, like, how many times have you seen the Germs flyer from their last show of the skeleton ripping through the Germs circle?
A million times.
And that's Shawn. And a lot of people don't even credit her with that. But, and that's fine, because, like, we do stuff and it gets co-opted or whatever. But her work is so iconic to that world. Oh, I figured it out. So it's Ernie Ball. Ernie Ball strings are the one that have the eagle on it. That's Shawn's artwork.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
I mean, think about it for a second.
I mean, are you saying this like you suspect that's what it is?
It's her artwork.
You know it.
No,
Okay,
the Ernie Ball logo is hers.
Huh. Interesting.
And, like, that's massive. Like, everybody from, like, the Rolling Stones to, like, Mod Podge or any band in between, they're using Ernie Ball strings. Like, that's, one of the premier guitar strings, and she did their logo.
Right. Man, I had no idea.
That's pretty incredible, isn't it?
It really is. Well, let's talk about a little bit of your artwork, because you've done a bunch of varied kind of things, and your style is definitely reminds me of some of the stuff I did in my background, for sure.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like,
well, I was influenced by you.
No.
Yeah, totally influenced. Well, it's the same thing. You and I both started, reading Mad Magazine and Cracked. And, like, I loved the fact that, like, you could pick up, and I love Star Wars. So when they started parodying everything Star Wars in there, I mean, there was no question, like, oh, is that supposed to be Mark Hamill? I mean, it was Mark Hamill. You could not get away from that. The way that they could caricature things and capture stuff was incredible to me. And so I was like, well, I want to do that with, things that I like. So maybe I was doing it with people in my class, which I'm betting you did.
Oh, yeah.
I would, and I'd look for the funny looking kids, and then I'd draw them, and, and so then I started developing my own style of, okay, this is how I want to make people look when I caricature them. And somebody had seen this in my drawings and said, hey, we kind of want to have you do something for the yearbook. So I did some caricatures of the teachers at my school for our yearbook, and they were less than complimentary pictures, and they wound. I mean, they're in. I mean,
the rest is history.
Yearbooks.
The rest is. So you insulted all the teachers in your school, and that was the beginning of your art career.
Yeah, I mean, like, isn't that like the perfect way to get started, right?
Yeah, insult a bunch of people that you might have mixed feelings about, that are in these positions of learning and teaching you stuff.
Well, I mean, it's brought us here. So, like, oh, here, I got to show you this, because, like, I just so happen to have the yearbook right here. I'm not kidding. Like, this is it.
They look really good.
I mean, like, look at this guy. Mr. Sweet could not have been happy about that. Oh, check this out. This is great, though. So right here, Mr. Miller, this guy, Mr. Miller's son was Four-Way, the singer for Bad Posture.
Bad Posture, the band that gave us that song, Goddamn Motherfucking Son of a Bitch.
The exact same. Well, it's funny because in high school, people were like, yeah, you know, Mr. Miller's son's in a punk band. And I was like, no, he's not in a punk band. And they're like, no, he really is. And so then somebody said, yeah, I think he's in a band called the Dead Kennedys. And I was like, no, he's not in the Dead Kennedys. So eventually one day I just asked him, I just said, hey, Mr. Miller, I've been hearing that your son is in a punk band. I heard he's in the Dead Kennedys. And I'm thinking, you know, he's probably East Bay Ray. Because, you know, Ray's a tall guy, and Mr. Miller was, I think, like 6'5", 6'7". He played basketball when he was in high school, and he's a huge math major. So I knew that his son had to be really tall also. And so he said, no, he's not in the Dead Kennedys, but he was in a band that played with the Dead Kennedys a lot. And I said, really? What band? And he said, oh, you wouldn't have heard of them. They're this band called Bad Posture. And our eyes kind of met, and he knew that I knew the song, but I couldn't in school say the title of this. So like, we kind of like, and I went, I know that band. And he was like, okay, I think you do. And I was like, oh my gosh, no way. So he brought in, you know, his son, Jeff, had sent him a Bad Posture t-shirt. And he also had the American Hardcore book, because that's Jeff on the cover. The cover of American Hardcore, the guy who's like bent forward like this. That's Four-Way Jeff, you know, Miller from Bad Posture. And so he brought in the book and he said, yeah, this is him on the cover. And I went, what? So that was one of my first exposures to that magazine or book in the first place. I was like, my math teacher is bringing this. Yeah, but it all goes back to that. So like, that was a big deal for me, because I was like, holy crap. Like, and he went to my high school years before, because his dad was, you know, he taught in military schools, and I was in England, and his dad had traveled around a bunch. But in England, Jeff had gone to school at Woodbridge High School where I went, and, you know, played basketball, and then got out to San Francisco, you know, started doing Bad Posture. And I think they moved to New York later in their career. But yeah, so there you go.
Well, I just like the fact that there's a Bad Posture name drop in this chat. So
because when else will there be?
No, man, we didn't even talk about the Slug Lords or Rebel Truth or all the other.
Yeah, Sacramento's Rebel Truth. Hell yeah, Sacramento's Rebel Truth.
Sacramento's Rebel Truth. They put out one of the most perfect hardcore 7 inches.
It's just great.
Peppy drumming lyrics that from astute young people that are actually kind of thoughtful, which is hard to do when you're like 17 years old. And how many well-meaning 17-year-old guys that think they had something to say in a hardcore punk band really were able to do it? Not a lot, in all fairness.
But, you know, if you think about it, like, I mean, I am constantly shocked by the fact that, you know, like when Milo Goes to College came out, that was written when like Bill and Milo were like 15 or 16. A lot of those songs were written. Like at 15 and 16, I was the dumbest kid you would hope to meet. And the fact that they're writing songs that to this day, I mean, kids are just now discovering and are classics in the punk rock world. The fact that the Adolescents started when they were, in fact, all adolescents. And to this day, Amoeba is one of the like cornerstones of like, hey, you're getting into punk rock? This is a song for you. That was written when they were teenagers.
Yeah. If you want to hear a 5-minute epic, here's Kids in the Black Hole.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Don't even get me started.
Also, the irony of like, the adolescents who at the time hated children now have
I know, Tony's teaching them.
I kind of don't mind children anymore, but
no, they're pretty great.
children, yeah, the other place, they're pretty cool. Um, yeah, well, I did talk. Bill's in the Bill Stevenson let me interview him, and that actually went really well. And he promised me to not print a lot of it or put it on social media, which I'm honored because it's a really good interview, and he was very it was good. It was nice.
Bill is great in interviews, and his memory is so sharp about so much of, in particular, the early days, because I mean, it was so formative for him. So, but I mean, in interviews, wow, he is a wealth of information.
Yeah, he gave me a really good interview, and since you brought up Milo Goes to College and being a kid, and we were talking about these other kids being kids and doing these things, yeah, Milo Goes to College. You know, like I think he said he was 18 years old, maybe when they recorded that, 17, 18, and that's like still one of the benchmarks of a definite defining drum style.
Oh, yeah.
Related, and it has influenced lots of people, and it was created by a 17-year-old that took a boat out and fished, you know, before going to school. So it's really interesting, and just thinking about how much legs that kind of stuff has, because now it's just part of rock and roll and part of music. But at the time we first got into all that stuff, it was just kids doing this stuff for the most part. Yeah. And you know, and now it's like we're not kids looking back and talking about art and music and stuff. Woohoo! All right.
Yeah. I mean, it's really remarkable when you think about, you know, some of those things that were early pieces that were written and are now still as exciting to teenagers as it was when we were teenagers and we were first hearing it. You know, and you know, one of the best things that I've ever heard as far as like putting stuff into perspective was somebody was talking, it was an interview with Mike Watt. And, you know, somebody was saying, oh man, I really wish that I had been, you know, like in Pedro in those early days when the Minutemen were forming and everything. And he just goes, well, we can't all be born at the same time. And I just went, it's so brilliant because you get no choice about that. So whenever you're exposed to something, that is your first time. So if you didn't live down the street from Watt and you didn't grow up, you know, hearing them practice in their garage, so be it. So if you heard them when you were listening to Spotify and somebody just suggested that you listen to, you know, Felt Like a Gringo or whatever, who cares? That's your time. Like, you still are exposed, and the music has no shelf life. And that's the thing that, like, I don't understand with some people, and well, I guess I do. But there are some musicians that, you know, never want to return to their past in that, you know, oh, when we wrote this, we were teenagers and, you know, it's not applicable today or whatever. And yet they would have no qualms with going and seeing somebody perform Mozart or Beethoven or whatever. Does that have a shelf life? You know, because that was written when Mozart was in his early 20s and, oh, those were his reckless years. Come on. Great music is great music. We can't all be born at the same time, but I can still love and appreciate something if today's my first day hearing it. And I can be every bit as excited about it as anyone else can. And like the elitism that goes along with any music, you know, fan, there is elitism built into that community. It's like, there's no room for that. You know, there is no room because we can't all be born at the same time.
It's all I have left, though, man. It's all I have left is to be a music snob.
But I think about it, like, I was so snobby and such a turd when I was in my 20s. For what? You know, I was so elitist about the ideas that I had and, you know, my ideals and what I would do and what I wouldn't do. And, like, I get older and I just go, what? I didn't know anything, and I thought I was so worldly and educated and brilliant, and I was just a dunce.
Yeah, well, you know, the older you get, the more you realize how little you really know, and as long as and that's just sort of how it should be. You can't pretend like you know everything. And the older I get, the more I just think, yeah, I know less now than I thought I knew when I was in my 20s. I thought I knew. You know, that's a common observation, I think.
And I feel very, very fortunate to be open-minded and okay with the fact that I don't know everything, and I don't care to, you know, because I think that when you get it set in your brain that you've got all the answers, then you're definitely afraid of making mistakes. And if you can't make a mistake, you have nothing to learn, because you only learn through those things that, you know, were mistakes, whatever they might be. You learn, and that propels you forward. If you've got all the answers and you're afraid to make mistakes, you don't ever grow. You're stunted. And so you're emotionally or artistically stuck in a rut that you're never going to get out of. And then you have to feel like you have to keep replicating or attaining the same level of whatever you once had. Well, that's gone, man. You know, deal with the here and now.
Oh yeah, I always want to assume that whatever I'm going to do next is going to make me as excited as anything that happened 20 years ago, 30 years ago. You know,
but you and I are still making, and we're still, you know, like I get so tired of some artists or photographers who stopped producing, and all they have now are what they did in, you know, like maybe the early 80s, and that's all they hold on to.
I know who you're talking about, and I'm not going to bring him up. And,
no, but you know what I mean? It's like, okay, that's great, but what do you do now? And if you are really prolific now, why are you not sharing that with people? Why are you resting on your laurels? Because that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, well, you know, like being an illustrator in this day and age, or any time really, there's not a lot of laurels to rest on. You know, there's just that need. There's just that need to feed the beast. You know, because it's art and drawing are that's like one of the only things I can really do that makes me feel right or normal.
Yeah,
you know, it's a blessing and a curse. It's probably more of a curse. It's probably slightly more of a curse for me because than you. Maybe there's this punishing dark side of you that I haven't met yet. But I think what I've seen is what I get from you, and you're definitely more of an upbeat kind of person. But it's like, yeah, the whole thing is about being creative. I'm dumb enough to think that that's the solution to everybody's problems. It's like, well, if you just did something, if you were creative, then, you know. But see, like, I'm dumb enough to think that's how, you know, like my brother, my little brother, he's like a sports guy, and you know, he's a good dude, but he's not a music guy like I'm a music guy. He doesn't really like music that much, and he's not really a kind of a creative person. And to me, that's just my solution to everything. Well, you know, not that he's asking for any help or whatever, but it's like, man, things would be so much cooler for you if you just did something, had a hobby, was creative, and was doing nothing. That's like my solution for everything.
But I mean,
just do something.
The whole idea of being able to give life to something that didn't exist before is remarkable. You know, so to be able to take, you know, a blank canvas or a blank piece of paper and put something down that makes somebody happy or makes somebody think or is amusing or if nothing else, it's just an outlet for you and I.
Makes you happy.
You know, that's really important.
I'm very thankful.
Oh, me too.
Even this year, as weird as it is, it's like it's made me feel more grateful for what I have and not worry so much about what I don't have, and especially, you know, just, well, I'm still generally doing what I want to do, you know, for the most part, you know. I'm still, you know, when I was in high school discovering punk rock, I would be listening to some mangled demo that I'd get in the mail from a pen pal in Brazil or Italy. You know, here's the Wretched.
Oh, this is great.
I'm gonna draw to this, and like I would just listen to this badly recorded punk rock and draw, and got really excited, and nothing's changed. That's the same thing I do today. Not music in general, more so than punk rock. You know, just, you know, because I always loved music, but I did that stuff in high school, and I do the same thing now, and I'm grateful.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I am too. And I know for you and for me, it's a compulsion. So like, I can't stop doing it.
I can't. I can't. I've tried.
And when the whole pandemic thing got started, it was like, that's all I felt like I could do. And that's all I really wanted to do. I was like, well, I got all the hours, so I'd wake up in the morning, I go, I've been watching WKRP. I got to draw Johnny Fever this morning. And then now I got to do Venus Flytrap. And I'm doing stuff that has no interest in most people. But
yes,
I have to do it. So, you know.
Yeah. Like, what did I do today? Today, well, was really into Todd Rundgren today and discovered a Utopia record that I hadn't heard. I was like, man, this is like a prog rock Beach Boys. This is like the most amazing music ever. Well, okay, now I got to draw Utopia. Last night, drew something about SCTV, my favorite show. So, you know, it's just, and there's no real interest level on that stuff, but, you know,
it's a compulsion.
At this point, it seems like even if I do that and put it out there, something's going to happen. It's a compulsion. Yeah.
Well, and you know, the thing is like, you know, if it's just getting it out of our system and getting the creative juices flowing, and it's producing, it's doing something, it's like I said, breathing life into something that wasn't there before. That's important in and of itself. Like the act of creating is sometimes more exciting to me than the end product. You know, I sometimes just kind of like doodle and it never goes anywhere, but I'm just like, yay, this is fun.
Yeah. Do you ever like have moments? I'm gonna wrap this up pretty soon. I should warn you ahead of time, but this will be kind of like my last few statements. As somebody that draws, do you ever get this feeling when you're in the middle of doing something and then it's almost like your brain shuts off and then the moment takes over and it's like the drawing or whatever you do finishes itself, and it's like really satisfying when that happens? It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens, you know, enough of the time to where it's like, yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Have those moments.
You know, I have more of those moments if I'm oil painting, which I haven't done in a long time, but with my Sharpie drawings, it happens almost every drawing because I just get lost in the chaos, because like using a Sharpie to try and create tones and textures and values and different line weights, and like, I'm not kidding, like when I'm doing that, this is what I'm using. I'm not, there's nothing fancy. It's just, I bought it at a truck stop and now I'm drawing with it. And to be able to make that connection where it's almost this seamless connection between my eye looking at something and my hand replicating it, even if it doesn't look the same, it doesn't make any difference. But that moment where there is that connection, it feels like I understand what creation is. I can't explain it, but I'm definitely connected to something bigger than me. You know, and I know you've got these moments where you do something, you go, damn, that's good. Who did that? Like, I don't know. You know, and I feel like I've tapped into something. The philosopher, gosh, I can't remember his I want to say it's Jung is the last name, but he's got this idea of the collective unconscious, which is essentially underneath all of us is this river of shared experiences and knowledge that we've had for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can dip into that, and we are then connected to all of our ancestors and everything else. And it's this collective unconscious. It's things that we all have built into who we are. And I feel at those moments like I am tapping into that creative feel of this collective unconscious, which is no different than what Michelangelo felt. Not that I'm making stuff like him, but it's no different than what he felt or what Picasso felt or anyone else through the ages.
Yeah, it's just about being driven to create something and do something. And you know, like we're paying tribute to everything that we are with everything all of our experiences, what we like, maybe some of the stuff we don't like, that even that could be a positive influence. You know, we're just kind of tapping into that, and it's like a spark. You know, it's like the feeling of maybe being inspired by other art and music and makes you want to do your own version of that. You're not trying to compare yourself to that, but you're just, it's almost like your soundtrack for either creating some artwork that's inspired by some band you like or some record you like that day. Or
it all comes back to the big boys. It all comes back to the big boys. It's that do it yourself. Shut up, quit talking about it, do it yourself.
Yeah, it's true.
Full circle.
Full circle. You know what? You just wrapped it up beautifully. I think that was great. I guess you tied in the start of the conversation and made it the end. So
that's what I do in the classroom every day.